Lawrence was right. So this morning we're going to be talking about God as our substance and our supply. And I want to tell a story that I learned as a child because I was raised in a Christian home. We read both the Old and the New Testament. And there's this great story about the prophet Elijah. And in the story it says, the Lord came to Elijah and told him, go to Zarephath. I get that. Go to Zarephath. And at the same time, he was telling the widow of Zarephath, someone's coming and I want you to feed them. So he comes to the town, and there at the well, she's drawing water. And he says to her, would you please draw some water for me? And she does, and he says, and while you're at it, would you please bake me some bread to eat? And she says to him, I'm so sorry. The amount of flour and oil that I have at home is enough for the very last meal that my son and I will eat together. And then we will probably die of starvation. And he says, the Lord will take care of it. You go, now he says, instead of a piece of bread, he says, go bake me a loaf of bread. He ups the ante and says, not just a piece, bake me a loaf. And when you finish baking the loaf for me, bake some for your son and yourself. And you will find that you will not go without. And as the story goes, she baked the loaf for him. And she continued to feed him while he was in town. It doesn't indicate how long. And there was food and water for her and her son the entire time as well. And the promise in the story was that she would not run out of this until rains came and they were able to grow new crops. So I used to wonder, as a child, how is it that the flower pot never went dry and the oil pot never went dry? And what I realize now is that it was an act of faith that no matter what, she was going to do what she believed God wanted her to do, and she would be supplied. And so in the same way, we can act on faith and know that we're going to be supplied. Because in our philosophy, we teach that God is our supply, that God is our substance. Sorry, I know that was killing you.
It's gone.
Oh.
I just turned it on.
Okay, well, I apologize. I will read the quote to you. The quote is this, from Science of Mind. Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote, God is spirit. This feels really hot, sweetie. Could you turn me down a little bit? God is spirit. Spirit is substance. Substance is supply. This is the keynote realization of the more abundant life, to the demonstration of success in financial matters. It is right that we should be successful, for otherwise the Spirit is not expressed. The divine cannot lack for anything, and we should not lack for anything that makes life worthwhile here on earth. I know many people who believe that it is somehow pious and holy to live a life of deprivation. I'm sure we've all met those people. We know of them. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having that austere life and doing that. And there's equally nothing wrong with having a lavish life. There's a text in the New Testament, in the book of Philippians, that says God will provide every need according to its ideas of riches and wealth. So if God is going to provide for us according to its ideas of riches and wealth, how is it that you and I don't live with streets paved of gold and mansions everywhere, as it's described, this is what it's going to be like, right? We're the reason why. Because we don't believe that we could have golden streets. I heard this great joke one time, this guy died, and he was very, very wealthy, and he had with him a suitcase when he got to the pearly gates. And St. Peter said, don't you know that you can't bring anything into heaven? You have to leave everything behind. And he says, you've got to make an exception for me. This is my life savings. You have to. He says, let me see it. So he opens the suitcase and he says, why would you want to bring pavement to heaven? Oh, she got it. Great. See, the things that we think are like so lavish, to God, that's pavement. Right? So what do we have to do to get into the perspective of realizing from God's perspective how lavish our lives could be? You know, if to God the gold that we put on our fingers is something to walk on, that really gives us an opportunity to examine our perspective. There are 3 schools of thought regarding the origin of the world. The first is that the world came into existence by nature, and that nature is not intelligent, and that it just works on its own accord and keeps on going and keeps on creating. The second school of thought is that it was created by an almighty, omniscient God, and that person is responsible for everything. And then the third school of thought, and the one that I subscribe to, is that the beginning of the world and of life is inconceivable since it had no beginning. See, we try to wrap our heads around the thought that there was no beginning, but we can't. I can't. I don't know about you. I can't imagine there not being a beginning to something, because we measure everything by when did it begin. But see, I believe that the world is being recreated 1,000,000 times every second. And maybe that's an underestimate. That creation that happens when the universal created itself into what we perceive as the universe, that same power exists within us, and we are creating as well. Modern science says that millions of years ago, a newly cooled Earth was lifeless, and that life came out of the ocean. It wasn't created once upon a time. It is recreated every time we create it. Now, I don't know anyone in my entire life who created an Earth and a solar system, but I know people who exist within that creation. I know people that exist within the omnipresent God. That's us. We exist inside of God, one of it. And so we have all of that same power internally that it has, because it can't not put its power where it's at. It's everywhere. And see, God is never limited, except by us. See, I like to think of something really immense that I can put my head around, and let's think Niagara Falls. It's big, right? Enormous. Now, if I am a conduit, a pipe in that falls, the amount of God that can go through me is only as big as I can imagine it to be. So maybe I've got a little half-inch, irrigation pipe, and that's all the water I can muster. Or maybe I've got one of those great big things that they put under the ground and carries water through cities where we don't want to have a stream, that enormous one. See, we're the ones who are putting the limit on how creative God can be through us. And so I like to think about how fantastic life could be if I wasn't limiting God. So I think to myself, what would it be like if it were exactly the way God would create it as me? What if I wasn't blocking any of that God energy, and it was simply able to flow out in this galaxy of blessing? Now, we talk about God as being the universe. The universe is too big for my head. So I had to step back, and I started looking at the Milky Way, the galaxy in which we exist. And I thought, okay, and I did some reading about galaxies so that I wouldn't be completely stupid. And our galaxy is a spiral galaxy with a central bar in the middle, and it's got two main arms, and then it's got two sub-arms, and then off of one of those sub-arms is a spur. We exist in the spur called Orion's arm. Now, the galaxy is 100,000 light years across. If you think about how much time it takes for the Earth to go around the sun one time, am I saying this right? The Earth, a year, right? It would take 250 billion years for us to go all the way around the galaxy. Within that galaxy, all of the mass, all of the stars, everything that exists there, that exists within a halo of matter, of energy, of stuff, of substance. And there is so much of that substance that we could recreate. There's 200 billion stars in our galaxy, and there is enough matter to create 200 billion more, as measured by scientists who know what they're talking about. So, if there is all of that substance that exists as our galaxy, and all of that which could double the size of our galaxy, there is no shortage of substance from which we can create. Right? I was finally able to wrap my head around that. If this is the universe, and this all exists around it, or not the universe, the galaxy, excuse me, could double its size, then there is enough in the world for me to have everything I need and have it remove nothing from you. See, one of the things that I was taught as a kid is that if I had everything I needed, maybe somebody else wouldn't have everything they needed. You know, we hear stories of famines and, people going hungry and people going without. I don't know about you, but my mother said, there's people in China who are starving tonight.
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And I one time only, because I learned my lesson, I said, send it to them. Only one time. That's all it took. There is so much bounty available in the galaxy, which exists with hundreds of billions of other galaxies in the universe, so that every single one of us can have every single thing we need and no one would ever go without. If we just believed it. And that's what comes down to our blockage. How much do you believe you can have? I talk to people about age. And I look at Marjorie, 106. You go, girl. And I've talked to a lot of people, and most people I know say, oh gosh, I don't want to live to be 100. I don't want to live to be 90. I've got some people who say, I don't want to live to be 80. I think what we don't want is to live to be that age and lose all of the abilities that we have now, right? So I have to believe that within Marjorie, there is a belief that she does not have to do without because she's 106. She has a wonderful team of people around her that are doting on her constantly. She had a wonderful birthday party with live musical entertainment. She's having a party tonight, like she does every month, because she believes she can. Right?
And she's feisty.
And she's feisty. Are you feisty? I'm feisty.
Ornery.
Only the good die young, sweetie.
He said only the good die young.
Can't be good at it.
I got more for that. We live in a universe that is abundantly supplied with everything we could possibly conceive of, and yet most of us aren't even barely tapping into what's available. There's this great saying, and I'm probably going to slaughter it. Life is a banquet, and most poor sons of
Bitches.
are going hungry. Right? Thanks, Mama. I could never say a bad word from my
Sure, but you can lie.
Oh.
Someone's paying attention. I like that. You know, back in my Christian days, I'd say, you know what happens to liars?
Hands get on fire.
Their pants catch on fire. That's exactly right.
They tell better stories.
Oh, wow.
It's not an insult to me. I just lied. So, in his book, Spiritual Economics, Eric Butterworth says in the preface, there is a great need to establish ourselves in the omnipresence of the universal substance. We need to realize, and when I say realize, I mean make real for ourselves the knowledge that we exist within the omnipresent God. And that if we exist within that there is nothing outside of our reach. There is nothing outside of what we can accomplish. In his book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, Deepak Chopra writes, the source of all creation is pure consciousness, pure potentiality, seeking expression from the unmanifest to the manifest. And when we realize that our true self is one of pure potentiality, we align with the power that manifests everything in the universe. It comes to our realization. It comes to our belief. It's all there. We all exist within it, and some people are using it better than others because they're aware of it. And that's what it comes down to, is simply being aware of it. I don't get to use it more because I'm special. I get to use it because I'm aware. You get to use it because you're aware. The people who aren't using it aren't not using it because there's something wrong with them. They're not using it because they're not aware of it. And if they were aware of it, they'd be manifesting the same worlds that we want to be manifesting. So if you're experiencing something in your life that you want to change, all you have to do is think differently about it. And I know that sounds so elementary and so simple, and yet it's one of the most complex things we do. To really examine, okay, I think I'm worthy of $50,000 a year in income. What if 100,000 would be way more comfortable? Can I wrap my head around 100,000? If I can wrap my head around 100,000, can I make 100,000? See, I can't make 100,000 until I know that I'm worthy of it. Until I know that simply by declaring the truth of it, it is created. So because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was God. The Word. So you speak the word and the thing happens. And so when I can speak my word and say with absolute certainty, I'm worthy of 100 grand, I'll be making that. For the record, I am not currently making 100 grand. Our bookkeeper over here knows. By the way, I made the announcement. Thank you for your service to us. What you can conceive in your mind exists within the mind of God. So I like it when I can grab some little phrase from our common vernacular and assign it a more spiritual meaning. So let's say that Kathy comes to me and says, you know, you really shouldn't wear white after Labor Day. I say, I'll keep that in mind. I like that phrase. I'll keep that in mind. Those things that we keep in mind are the things that are happening in our experience. Because what we have kept in our minds is that which we're going to perceive. If it is not in our mind as a possibility in reality, it will not exist in the world outside that we see. It will be there, but we will not see it. So I will keep that in mind. Part of my spiritual practice is to keep it in mind. And so I sit down in my spiritual practice and I say, what do I want my life to look like? And I bring it to mind. And then I say, okay, now I've got it there. I'm going to keep it in mind, and I'm going to keep it there until I see it out here. Because it can't exist out here until I see it in here. So if there's something that you want, but you're only kind of half-assed thinking about it, that's all you're going to get. But when you put it in mind and leave it there fully, and keep knowing, keeping it in mind, it's going to manifest. Whether it's a Mercedes-Benz, or a Rolex watch, or a more peaceful existence. See, we live in this world which doesn't often look very peaceful. And yet, if we spend our time holding peace in our minds, then nothing that looks anything other than peace can come into our experience. We create this buffer that says, I'm radiating peace, and so only peace can come to me. I'm radiating love, and so only love can come to me. See, I know that there's a lot of crud going on in the world, and we don't have to be in it. We can rise above it by keeping in mind those qualities that we want to experience. See, most people don't get what they want because they're trained to think about what they don't want.
Yep.
Right? How many of you have, on any given day, gotten home and somebody asks you, how was your day? And the one bad thing that happened in that day is the thing you're talking about. It's true for me. I'll come home and Justin will be like, how's your day? And it might have been 15 minutes in the middle of my day, but it's defined the entire experience, right? Nothing else seems to even be there. And what I know then is that in order to transcend that negative thinking, I have to say, okay. And as I'm driving home, I ask myself, what good happened today? I don't ask what happened today. I specify what good happened today. And I sit with the good that comes. And so then when I get home and Justin says, how was your day? I can say, oh, well, I got to see Karen and I saw Mary and then and it's completely gone from my mind that I had to deal with somebody at the post office who wasn't really pleasant. Because that was 20 minutes in the middle of an otherwise beautiful day, right? So it behooves us to spend some time really thinking about the good things that are going on instead of focusing on the negative things, because they're always going to be there. Always. So they're there. We're not denying that they're there. We accept that they exist. But I also say it doesn't have to define my experience. It doesn't have to define yours. There is a creative power in the universe. It is greater than me, it is greater than you, it is greater than any of us, but it is within us and we can use it. And so if you want something different than you're experiencing, keep it in mind. Let's pray. And so I know that there is only God. I know that it is all that exists, and that everything I see in the manifest world is merely a manifestation of that. That indeed all I am is a manifestation of that one God. All that every single person is in this room is a manifestation of that creative power of God. That there is a substance and a supply in the universe that is unlimited. The only limit that gets put on it is the limit that I put on it. And so I open myself up purposefully, fully, vulnerably, and say, God, do your magic. Do your thing. Let me be an instrument in your hand. And I affirm that for each and every one of us, that we open up to the possibility of what God's idea of our life is, and stop thinking small. We allow God to be as grand and magnificent as it can be as us. And so with a great deal of relief, I don't have to make something happen. It's just waiting to happen. As soon as I get out of the way of it, I can simply let God be God and do its thing. And so it is. All right. And now we shift gears. It is now time to collect our offering. I like to call this the portion of the service that everybody gets to participate in. Because the offering affirmation is not there, I will direct you to the bottom affirmation on the inside of your program. We will repeat that together in a moment. I'm going to invite the ushers to come forward. Whoever is going to stand in for, are you standing in for Bobby? Sure. Thank you. And Jack is our other, and we will, yeah, you are my offering man, right? Who's gathering offering? Gather offering. Let's read together our offering affirmation found inside the program. I freely and joyously give from the abundance and fullness of my overflowing wealth, knowing my gift goes with love as it touches and blesses the world. And so it is. And now, Trish Whitendale has another beautiful piece for us.